But first, we've got to talk about the fate of the Earth and the future and reality of global arms control. Now, I'm going to start by quoting, this is in light of news that the Trump administration has declared that the U.S. will leave the OST, or Open Skies Treaty, which allows countries, including Russia and the United States, to conduct observation flights in each other's airspace. This was initially proposed back in the Eisenhower era. It was not implemented until negotiations between George Herbert Walker Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev during the Glasnost and Perestroika era. And this did a significant amount, and it's still done a significant amount, to cool down tensions and allow countries to engage in transparency in each other's nuclear and weapons capacities. I'm going to quote now from Michael Crepin, writing in Forbes. Donald Trump has now surpassed all of his predecessors combined when it comes to walking away from agreements to reduce nuclear dangers and weapons. His administration announced that withdrawal from the 1992 Open Skies Treaty marks the third agreement to be deep sixth on his watch, after the Iran nuclear deal negotiated in the Obama administration and the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty negotiated in the Reagan administration. Previously, Trump was tied with George W. Bush, who withdrew from two agreements, one with Russia and another with North Korea. Trump's record of walking away from the accomplishments of his predecessors has not made America safer. As arms control unravels, nuclear dangers grow and U.S. alliances fray. A report from the Washington Post last week revealed that the Trump administration has been considering a weapons test, a first in 28 years, and a display of raw aggression against China and Russia. And let's bring up this piece from Reuters with a Trump administration official who said that what the United States plans to do is spend Russia and China into oblivion in an arms race. This is the U.S. Weapons envoy. Now, if you could just scroll down, I'm going to read from this. U.S. President Donald Trump's nuclear negotiator on Thursday said the United States is prepared to spend Russia and China into oblivion in order to win a new nuclear arms race. The president has made clear that we have tried and true practice here. We know how to win these races, and we know how to spend adversaries into oblivion if we have to. We will, and we would like to avoid it, said Special Presidential Envoy Marshall Billingsley in an online presentation to a Washington think tank. All this is taking place in the context of enhanced aggression towards China and ongoing, deeply shaky relations with Russia. Of course, Russia itself has also been itching to pull out of the Open Skies Treaty. Trump has, as we've said before, moved out of SALT, and when the New START expires in 2021, it will be the first time in 50 years that there will be no agreement between the world's largest powers to limit their arsenals. The current U.S. stockpile is 3,800 active warheads. 1,600 of these are in ICBMs or in SLBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. During the Obama administration, the record was mixed, starting with the incredible accomplishment and success of the Iran deal that Joe Biden has indicated he would return the United States to should he be elected president. Obama also entered into a new agreements on limiting the arsenals and arms reductions with Russia. At the same time, Obama promised to modernize U.S. nuclear systems in 2010, shortly before the U.S. nuclear deal New START. By 2016, the program had gone far beyond the original vision, including a program to develop and deploy a new ICBM, or intercontinental ballistic missile. Trump has increased nuclear spending by an estimated 23% from Obama's estimates, increasing the U.S. access to plutonium, which is more radioactive and powerful than uranium. The Trump administration's plan increases, quote, U.S. capabilities to quickly produce new or additional weapons. This is in addition to the 3,000 and 800 weapons the U.S. already possesses. Pursuing research on new types of mobile ICBMs and the creation of hypersonic missiles for nuclear delivery. Trump's pursuit of unilateralism has damaged the global system of nonproliferation at a dangerous time, when Russia and China have both signaled an expansion of their own arsenals and programs. We're entering into a new multipolar dynamic and an infrastructure that, despite many flaws, had served the world well, is being aggressively unraveled by the Trump administration. And we know that this poses a threat to all of us. And the only way to restore sanity to global arms control is coordinated international action and pressure from citizens in an already deeply strained world. But this is important to track. I mean, this is foundational stuff. This is the capacity really of the human race to survive. And there is a deep ideological pull that's always been, very aggressive in Republican circles to undermine these agreements. John Bolton took to Twitter. Supposedly, he was so disgusted by the Trump administration, he was very happy to praise Trump pulling out of Open Skies. So this is stuff that we need to track, and this is stuff that is profoundly dangerous.
Mm. It's so frightening to think that very likely, coming into 2021, that the United States and Russia will not have any kind of international treaty, with governing their weapons stockpiling. That was supposed to be something that was behind us, and the main goal was getting rid of these stockpiles. But the Trump administration recently was talking about testing a nuclear weapon, something we haven't done since the early 90s. I think everyone listening to this understands the gravity of the threat of nuclear, proliferation. But it's one of those things that it's so, I don't know, it's difficult to wrap your head around, and it happens so slowly, the way that this can just sort of ratchet itself up, that it's important not to take your eye off the ball, because Trump has really been doing a lot of this basically behind the scenes, because it's not the thing that comes up to the top of the news feed for most folks.
Yeah, I was going to say, this isn't something to be complacent about the dangers to. Even when Obama was president, it was almost like the sort of thing when Trump was coming in office, you're like, well, maybe we can use him to renew our focus on these areas that we're not paying close enough attention to. And to our horror, 4 years later, we're really not. But there's books like Daniel Ellsberg's Doomsday Machine, Eric Schlosser, Command and Control, and there's another one called The Dead Hand. I mean, they'll terrify you. If you want to be existentially terrified, this is a subject, I think, equal on par with climate change that's just horrifying. And we don't take it seriously enough. And almost because it's too horrifying to really think about on a regular basis. And there's nothing we can do really, except, hopefully get a bureaucracy that can take care of this stuff and sign some deals, maybe. I don't know.
And we're lucky to be in the position of being in the U.S., for example. It worries me enough, don't get me wrong, but can you imagine being in a country that doesn't have access to a nuclear weapon and and having the thought that, the survival of the human species depends on the politics and the decisions of bureaucrats of the United States and Russia and China? It's completely absurd just on a moral level that, certain governments basically are able to hold the fate of the world in their hands, with an action that could be done so quickly.
It's literally one of the most absurd things possible, on a planet, I think. That, I think Kennedy said that. He had some famous quote, some kid somewhere won't, wake up on a spring day because he decided to. That will never happen again. Mm-hmm. And it's it's just it's super absurd. It's just mass extinction at the push of a button.
Right. And outside of a context where types of theorists love the fact that, of course, on some level, the fact that the world would be liquidated limited what could have been a hot war in Europe, what could have been much more aggressive confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. Now, that frame is a problem because it doesn't account for the millions of lives that were lost in proxy wars really across the world. And, the Soviets supporting various liberation movements and, intransigent regimes that both governments supported. So there was obviously a huge amount of hot conflict and cost to human life because of the Cold War. However, yes, there's no doubt that because of mutually assured destruction, that those two superpowers did not go up against each other, even though we know it came very close. The most famous, of course, Cuba. Mm-hmm. But in today's environment, you don't have that same kind of sort of basic one-to-one, because even the other countries that are, China did. I mean, China went nuclear in the 60s, maybe even earlier, actually. So you did have the sort of Chinese dimension. And then France and the UK are, basically part of the same Western security architecture. But, in today's world, you have, Russia's going to keep their arsenal, so they maintain relevance. You have generations of people in the United States who are really interested in how these things can be usable. Can you build ones that are small enough that they could be deployed tactically? I mean, there's really disturbing stuff.
Yeah.
And then again, places like the UK and France that, want to maintain their relevancy. China is going to continue to play just a different and more powerful role in the world. And that's part of it. And then, of course, it's not even accounting for the fact that India and Pakistan is the most dangerous place on earth. That would be the most likely place that it would happen. And the only conclusion that North Korea can possibly draw from anything, whether it's Iraq, Libya, or Iran, and its own experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're surrounded by a huge amount of military presence on the peninsula. Of course, they've continued that development. And, there's a lot of trust, after that governments, including in South Africa and Brazil, they dismantled programs. Based on the idea that we were actually moving towards that shared goal after the Cold War. And now we're going the absolute opposite direction. And then go to the Middle East. Israel has it. They won't acknowledge it. Israel, in addition to being the most powerful military, has the arsenal. Mm-hmm. Will Iran, change their mind? There's no actual hard evidence that Iran's ever pursued it before, but certainly in their rational interest to pursue it. And if they do, no doubt the Saudis will. So all at the same time that the Trump administration is very aggressive and belligerent around undermining all of the frameworks that have worked.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that it's just like what the Trump administration is doing is it's not just like a 1-for-1 with the United States and Russia. The idea is that like if you have these two countries sort of working together to stop the spread and basically the further development of these weapons, then that's going to sort of trickle down towards the other nations like in their spheres of influence, right? And this just completely eradicates any kind of international standard for what is and isn't acceptable when it comes to these weapons. It's beyond reckless. Easily one of the more frightening developments that we've had in the past 3 years, which just say a lot with the Trump administration.
And it can't be emphasized enough. Tearing up the Iran deal is a world historical assault. It was the most successful thing in foreign policy by far that the Obama administration had done. It was an actual concrete positive step that could pay enormous dividends on a variety of hot issues. And the Trump administration, and I think any Republican president would have ended up doing the same thing, frankly, aggressively went after it, tore it up, ripped it up, partially, obviously, at the behest of the aggressive undermining by Israel and by Saudi Arabia. And no one questions that the deal was working, and no one questions that Iran was in full compliance.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.